Good morning, everyone. Welcome to East Texas Today on KETK Plus. I'm your host, Tristan Van Beam, and it is so great to have you all joining me this morning, as always. And I'm always so glad to bring you guys the latest content and news coming from around the East Texas area. I have a lot of stories for you all today. As usual, I try to provide the best stuff that I can, including a longer interview towards the end of the show, which is going to kind of go over the genealogical technology that was used to help find a suspect in a almost 40-year-old murder case out of Henderson County. Now, a couple of you might recognize this story that I'm talking about, as we covered it a couple of days ago, but recently a possible suspect was discovered in connection to a murder that happened nearly 40 years ago because of newer gene technology that was developed. But enough about that. I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into our first story of the morning, as several law enforcement agencies across Smith County have joined or are considering joining the 287G Task Force Model Program. Precinct 1 said it will not seek to participate in this program. Constable Ralph Caraway stated his office will continue to enforce the law and remain committed to serving and protecting the community while upholding the rights of all residents. Caraway said, quote, "We will continue to enforce the law, investigate crimes, serve civil process, and conduct traffic enforcement consistent with our legal authority and duties. Those responsibilities will not be expanded or exercised for the purpose of targeting any person because of race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, color, or creed." Constable Caraway stated he wants to remain transparent about his decisions to not join the task force and encourages any residents with questions or concerns to visit his office. Another quote from Caraway says, "We welcome community engagement and transparency. If you have questions or concerns, please contact the Precinct 1 Constable's office. We will continue to work with citizens, community leaders, and organizations to help ensure public safety while protecting the rights and dignity of everyone in Smith County." On Tuesday morning, during the Smith County Commissioners Court meeting, a motion was passed permitting the Precinct 4 Constable's office to join the program, and the motion was supported by Constable Josh Joplin, who justified the decision, claiming it helps reduce crime across the county and enables them to protect residents better. A quote from Joplin said, "Everyone wants to live the American dream, but when that dream is funded through crime and victimization, that person becomes a threat and a cancer to our precinct, our state, and our nation." The motion was approved 4-1, with Commissioner Ralph Caraway being the one opposing vote. Caraway stated he opposed allowing Precinct 4 to join the task force, citing his belief that the agreement with the Smith County Sheriff's Office is sufficient. Smith County residents voiced their opinion, and for more than an hour, more than 40 residents voiced the concerns against the constable's office joining the task force. Among those, Carolyn Davis, a county resident, says joining the program would be detrimental to the community. Davis said in a quote, "Your vote is not making this county safer. It is dividing and creating fear and pitting law enforcement against hardworking people in this country." Smith County resident Sharon Guthieri supports the decision to join the program, as she believes it will contribute to keeping this country safe. Guthieri said, quote, "Defending our borders, protect its citizens, and not let our country be overrun by people who do not share our values and do not share our culture." Other law enforcement agencies in Smith County are considering partnering with ICE, including the ARP Police Department. Now, just kind of a quick review of what I just talked about. It's looking like Smith County Precinct 1 has declined to join this task force, but Precinct 4 would like to join this task force. And just an overview, this task force is partnering with immigration in order to try to cut down on the amount of legal immigrants that are in the country and possibly deport them to the countries in which they are legal citizens of. And in another story in Smith County, the Smith County Commissioner's Court approved a feasibility study on Tuesday to evaluate necessary improvements for the county's animal shelter.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
The proposed agreement calls for Fitzpatrick Architect to assess the shelter's condition. The proposal includes bringing in engineers to assess site improvements, utilities, drainage, SPA access, mechanical and plumbing issues, and other recommended enhancements. Following the evaluation, American Rescue Plan Act, also known as ARPA, funds would be used to create a dog park and shaded green space. The city will also evaluate the current facility for potential upgrades that would address the interior exhaust and drainage problems. Research will be required to ensure compliance with local site regulations. Smith County officials said the ARPA funded grant was amended in July to ensure that current funding covers the animal shelter. And then moving on to our next story of the evening, in a narrow 3-2 decision, the Hawkins City Council voted to remove municipal judge Mitch Henderson from his position. The decision comes as the city faces a $1.2 million budget deficit and can no longer afford to employ a judge. The role of a municipal judge is to oversee local court systems, handle minor offenses, and ensure that justice is served throughout the community. Mayor Debbie Rushing said, quote, "He was removed because we no longer have a police department or a city court. That is the only reason for the decision. The police department was dissolved in June after it was left with only one remaining officer. 3 officers had been fired in February by Rushing, who argued they had not been properly hired because the city council had never approved their employment." Just a quick recap there. So it looks like that animal shelter over in Smith County is going to get a study to see if improvements can be made in order to enhance the shelter's resources. And then also looks like, excuse me, let me just scroll back a little bit here. It looks like the municipal judge was not removed from his position because of any wrongdoing, just a lack of funding. And then for the final story for this first section of our show, 200 Texas National Guard soldiers deployed by President Trump to Illinois are packing up and heading home. A Defense Department official says the soldiers should be gone within 2 days. They spent the past month on a base an hour southwest of Chicago. The president federalized the troops so they could protect immigration enforcement operations in Chicago, but a series of court cases questioned the legality. Judges blocked their deployment into the city while the Supreme Court reviews the case. Excuse me, that was not the last story of this section of the morning show. That is my fault. I do have one more for you before we go into our break, and that is the annual Tyler Cattle Barons Ball announced its theme for the 2026 ball, which will be held this coming June. Similar to previous years, this year's ball will be supporting the American Cancer Society, and the theme will be Mount Up with Wings Like Eagles. The theme is inspired by the Bible verse Isaiah 40:31 that conveys a message of hope, resilience, and spiritual strength. The verse is also meant to honor those fighting cancer, ensuring that every patient can transcend above the disease. The ball will be held at the W.T. Brookshire Conference Center on June 27th, marking the 30th year the event has taken place since 1988. The event has raised funds to support local and national cancer support services, including cancer research and patient resources. Those wanting more information on how to become a sponsor, donate auction items, or volunteer can contact Senior Development Manager Melissa Ivy at 903-570-8126, or can contact her through melissa.ivy, that's melissa.ivey@cancer.org. sight.org. Alrighty, y'all, we've come to that time of the show where it is the first break of the show coming up right here. And then when I come back, we will have some more stories to review, including a congressional map block that is being disputed by an East Texas lawmaker and a Longview house fire that suffered $200,000 worth of damages. But, stick around if you want to hear those stories. I will see you all right after this break. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to East Texas Today on KETK Plus. I'm your host, Tristan Van Beem, and thank you so much for joining me this morning. In case you are just now joining the show, we went over some stories over in Smith County, including 2 precincts, one that rejected joining a immigration task force, and then one that opted to join the immigration task force to help with any issues they may be having in their areas of the county. And then we just also went over some Texas soldiers that went over to Chicago for the National Guard, but they are being sent back currently to the United States. So that is what you missed during the first section of the show. That's just a little bit of a teaser. So if you want to go ahead and catch that first part of the show and you missed it, I will be posting this show on our YouTube page later on in the day, so be on the lookout for that. On to the next section of our show. The Longview Fire Department is currently investigating the cause of a house fire that occurred last week and led to $200,000 in damages. As you all can see on your screen, that is just an absolutely devastating picture. On the right, you can see this home that is just engulfed in flames with a bunch of smoke coming out of it, and that is truly devastating for the family that was living in that home. Let's go ahead and find out more information on this story. According to the fire department, upon arrival at the house on Honeysuckle Lane, they reported heavy smoke and flames coming from the house. Firefighters successfully brought the fire under control after initiating an aggressive fire attack. The fire was put out with the help of 4 fire engines, 2 ladder trucks, 4 support vehicles, and 24 first responders. According to officials, injuries were reported. However, the home sustained an estimated $200,000 in damages. Anyone with information on how the fire started is asked to contact the Longview Fire Department at 903-237-1119 or Gregg County Crime Stoppers at 903-236-7867. Wow, that is just sad to hear that there were injuries reported in that fire, and on top of the $200,000 in damages, I know that whoever lived in that home and sustained the possible injuries or just had their home lost is just feeling absolutely grim right now. So our heart goes out to them. And then for our next story, a Tyler nonprofit is celebrating a major milestone: 10,000 sight-restoring surgeries provided to people in need while sharing the gospel across rural West Africa. Sight.org, which was founded in Tyler, sends medical and ministry teams to remote villages to offer free cataract surgeries to individuals who would otherwise remain blind. Alongside medical care, the team also teaches and shares the message for God's Word. The organization began in 2012 when 27-year-old Louis Swan connected with church pastor Peter Dessau, and Dessau had previously described feeling called to help people in rural Africa after dreaming of blind villagers pleading for their sight to be restored. Despite having little money and no formal credentials, Swan and Dessau launched their website the same year. Since then, the nonprofit has trained 37 African doctors and shared the gospel with more than 55,000 people throughout Togo and its neighboring nations. This making it the organization is now one of the Africa's leading efforts to eliminate preventable blindness among the poor. Blindness is widespread in sub-Saharan Africa, and it affects roughly 1 in 20 people in rural communities. Cataracts remain the leading cause, driven by factors like malnutrition and intense tropical sunlight. In many parts of Togo, access to eye surgery is nearly non-existent. As the team began their work on the nonprofit, they witnessed the severe challenges faced by people living with blindness. Employment opportunities are extremely limited, and families who care for blind relatives often remove children from school to act as caretakers, depending the cycle of poverty, excuse me. With support from local donors, the nonprofit provides 15-minute cataract surgeries that restore sight to individuals who may have lived decades in darkness. After surgeries, ministry teams visit patients' homes to share the gospel with them and their families. They also minister to entire villages, connecting new believers to local churches or helping establish one of its non-exist. The nonprofit reached a milestone this October with its 10,000th sight-giving surgery and continues to use God's word to guide its mission to change lives across Africa. Wow, I know that is just one picture there up on your screen, but I know that we have a whole article with possible hyperlinks that gives more details on the story. I've actually seen similar YouTube videos to this for similar nonprofits that go into these rural parts of Africa and help people regain their sight. I cannot believe that the surgery is only about 15 minutes long. I believe I've seen a similar story with this in other Asian countries with children who suffer from cleft lips, and that surgery also takes about 15 to 20 minutes as well. So it's just great to see these nonprofits do these sort of acts for people who just would not be able to have access to these type of surgeries that are honestly life-changing. I mean, as you just listened to, 10,000 people weren't able to see, and now they have had their sight back thanks to the kindness of this nonprofit organization and those that donate money to it as well. Well, that was such a great story, and now it is time to learn about another story that is going on in White Oak, where schools were dismissed early on Tuesday after a citywide water shutdown prompted by a major leak along White Oak Road, according to officials. White Oak's primary principal's office said the district released students early after the city of White Oak announced it was shutting off water service to the entire city to repair a leak in the 1300 block of White Oak Road. Elementary bus routes departed at 1:30 p.m., followed by a secondary route at 2 p.m. All basketball games scheduled for Tuesday night were moved to New Diana. City officials urged residents to avoid the area surrounding the leak for the safety of repair crews, and in a statement, the city said crews were working to restore water service as soon as they can. Also on Tuesday, the city issued a boil water notice after pressure in the municipal water system dropped below 20 psi, triggering state safety requirements. The Texas Commission on Environmental Quality directed the city of White Oak's public water system to warn residents to boil water for at least 2 minutes before drinking, cooking, or making ice. Bottled water may be used as an alternative, and in just a most recent update of this story, the city of White Oak has restored the water system as of 4:30 p.m., and White Oak ISD will have school tomorrow. A boil water advisory remains until further notice. Wow, it is always so tragic to see cities in East Texas, or just honestly parts of East Texas, have their water issues. I feel like it's every week that I bring up a water story within East Texas. But thankful for White Oak, it looks like things are slowly getting back to normal as the water systems has been restored. But as I mentioned, a boil water advisory is still remaining until further notice. So be sure to keep on the lookout. for an update on that, you can also check out our website, KETK.com, where there is an article for that story about White Oak, and I'm sure that it will be updated as soon as a boil water notice is rescinded. Then moving on to our next story of the morning, East Texas Representative Pete Sessions on Tuesday pushed back against a federal court ruling that blocks Texas from using its newly drawn GOP-favored congressional map in upcoming elections. In a 2-1 decision, a 3-judge panel ordered the state to revert to its previous map, finding that the legislature's new plan was essentially a racial gerrymander. Republican lawmakers approved the map earlier this year in hopes of gaining as many as 5 additional U.S. House seats in 2026. Sessions said he disagreed with the court's characterization of the map, arguing that the legislature produced lines that were, quote, were drawn in ways that are fair and free and open, end quote. Sessions said, quote, if you look at the map, you can see that it was drawn in ways that are fair. It stretched Republicans, it stretched us to handle 2 million more Democrats, end quote. When asked whether adding large blocks of Democratic voters to several Republican seats could backfire if the map ultimately stands, Sessions said he sees the long-term outlook differently. Sessions said, quote, in the long run, I believe that, as with all maps, they change. I had no input in that, but I feel very comfortable saying I could look at it and see where the map would make sense, at least from a perspective of being a fair map that does not look gerrymandered. That does not look like it is in large amounts of only rural and suburban areas that I think is a good mix for a member of Congress to have. It balances their vote better. Once again, that is a quote from Sessions himself. Sessions also argued that the redistricting process in the previous decades, gave Democrats near early control over drawing their preferred districts. An advantage, he said, forced Republicans to, quote, struggle over the fight for the remaining lines. He pointed to states such as California and New York, which he said has eliminated GOP-held seats in their own maps. Sessions said, quote, this was a case of California, New York, and other places that had overwhelmingly wiped out Republican seats. Now, as soon as Texas started this, California really went after wiping out seats, so it's been seen in the aggregate what the net is. For now, the ruling leaves the state's political future uncertain. Texas Governor Greg Abbott quickly vowed to appeal, and Sessions said the case is likely headed to the nation's highest court. Sessions said in another quote, we know we're dealing with the Fifth Circuit, which has now ruled that it will delay these maps in this case. It's now up to the Supreme Court to make that final determination, end quote. Alrighty, y'all. So that is the end of that story. And moving on to our next story, a name has been revealed for the Nacogdoches Mid-American baseball team. Let's go ahead and pull that picture up right now. Nacogdoches' Mid-American League baseball team will take the field in 2026 as the Nacogdoches Niners. Officials announced at a city council meeting on Tuesday. The name pays tribute to the 9 flags that have flown over the city in its more than 300-year history. Mayor Randy Johnson said the identity, quote, connects our past with a new and exciting chapter in Nacogdoches athletics, end quote. League Commissioner Nick Weisenburn said community feedback strongly favored the Niners name, calling it a name that, quote, captures the history, identity, and pride of this incredible city. The team also introduced its first general manager, Jace Green, who will oversee baseball and business operations ahead of the club's inaugural season. Green said he hopes to build a team that reflects the community's tough, authentic character. Team merchandise will be available soon, and a Name the Mascot contest is open to fans online, with a winner expected in January 2026. The Niners will play at JC's Field beginning in May 2026. The Mid-America League, founded in 2024, features collegiate and post-collegiate players and is adding 4 expansion teams, including Nacogdoches, for its 2026 season. Well, I always love bringing y'all some latest sports news, especially some local East Texas sports news, as it is just so cool to see cities like Nacogdoches and other East Texas cities participate in sports like this and giving those collegiate athletes and post-collegiate athletes another chance to play the sport that they love. And it is that time of the show where I take another break, but don't go anywhere, as I'm going to bring Braden Siu into the studio here to kind of go over that weather. As yesterday we talked about that we're going to see some warm temperatures and possibly some heavy rain later on in the week. I know that today was pretty warm, and it's probably going to stay pretty warm throughout the week, but I'm going to go ahead and bring Braden in after the break to kind of discuss that and review that after this. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to East Texas Today on KETK Plus. I'm your host, Tristan Van Beem, and as I mentioned before the break, I was going to bring Braden into the studio and give you the latest weather updates that we have for today and going into the rest of our week. Braden, how are you doing this morning?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing very good as well. Nothing to complain about. It was, once again, pretty warm when I came into work this morning, and as I mentioned earlier, I am kind of more of a warm person. I don't really like the cold and everything like that. So how was your morning coming in?
It was pretty good. Certainly, definitely warm out there this morning, and we're going to keep seeing those temperatures climbing even as we head through this afternoon.
Well, I bet, and I mean, I'm all here for it. So it's still kind of shocking me that we're about mid-November now and still seeing this warm weather. But I'm going to go ahead and just let you explain why that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So starting off today with plenty of cloud cover out there, as you can see here from atop the station here in Tyler. We've got some cloud cover and also those temperatures right now sitting in those lower 70s. Those winds are south at around 9 miles an hour. And looking at the general statewide view here showing that boundary that's kind of draped there across the Red River Valley. And that's acting as kind of a division between some warm and humid air and also some cooler air up to the north. And you can see those temperatures are well into those 60s and 70s here across most of East Texas. So we're going to be warming things pretty significantly as we head through the afternoon, eventually getting up into the 80s later on today. So we are going to be talking about, once again, about 15 degrees above average, with lows tonight back down into those 60s across much of the area. And then that general consensus here is that the temperatures are going to be decreasing as we head through time. So eventually getting into the 60s for those highs heading into next week. Those low temperatures are likely going to be falling into the 50s and maybe even some upper 40s as we head into early next week. And then something else that we've talked about, of course, is those rain chances that are going to be ramping up here. About a 60% coverage Thursday into Thursday night. We could see some storms this evening, but that best chance again later in the day on Thursday. And then again, as we head into early next week. So as far as Futurecast goes, here's a look at that potential here for some showers and storms later on this afternoon and evening, especially in our northern counties. And then it looks like most of the day Thursday will be dry, and then we'll have some heavy storms move in late Thursday evening into the overnight. And then we'll continue to see on and off activity as we go through your weekend. And then it looks like another pretty good chance for some heavier showers and storms will move in as we head into the day on Monday. So all in all, we could be talking about the potential for maybe 3 to 5 inches of rainfall over the next 7 days. And the time frames are going to be, again, Thursday into Friday, and then again early next week. So that's going to be the best opportunities for some pretty significant rainfall. And then even thereafter, going later into the month of November, likely going to keep that unsettled pattern here across portions of the southern U.S. So it does look like this pattern will be sticking with us for the next couple of weeks. But today will be mostly dry until this evening, when we see about a 30% chance of some showers and a couple of storms. 83 is going to be that high. Tonight, lows fall into the 60s with scattered storms becoming possible. And then we'll be looking for that potential again as we head into late Thursday and Thursday night. And then early next week, it looks like another storm system going to bring us a chance for some rain. Temperatures also will be cooler with highs in the 60s. And then looking at Deep East Texas, overall a similar story with that potential here for some showers and storms late Thursday into Thursday night. And then again, that other storm system early next week, bringing yet another chance for some beneficial rain here across the area.
Well, thank you so much, Braden, for that update. Now, I just want to go ahead and ask, what times can we expect to see these showers if they do end up coming over?
Well, it looks like today will be mostly evening into the overnight, and then on Thursday looks also like an evening and overnight time frame there. And then again, as we head into next week, Monday is when another storm system looks to move into the area.
Okay, so then when the storm system potentially does move into the East Texas area, what can people do to prepare themselves for the storm? I know that some people have probably been through that already, but can they bring stuff inside their homes that they don't want to get destroyed? What can they do?
Well, mostly this is just going to be kind of some rain type of event, so not really expecting much in the way of any stronger storms out there. So that is some good news. As far as the rain goes, though, just certainly plan on any outdoor activities being moved indoors, especially if you have anything going on Monday. But it does look like most of the day today will be dry, and again tomorrow. But we do have that potential more towards the evening hours. I know there's some high school football games taking place, so we'll have to be watching for that. Just being aware of the weather, the best thing you can do.
That is a very good point that you brought up. It is playoff time in East Texas, I know, so a lot of people are going to be going to go to those games as we're kind of getting down to the final teams of the season. So just make sure that you're staying safe with that. And then you also mentioned that we might be going down more towards the high 60s in that area. So I know that's not exactly big coat weather, but with the rain and everything involved, how do you think people should prepare themselves as far as clothing for when they go outside?
Yeah, certainly looks like temperatures are going to be on a downward trend as we go into Thanksgiving week. So we'll be looking at more of maybe long sleeve type weather rather than those short sleeves. So it does look like we'll get closer to what we should be feeling this time of the year as we head into next week.
All right, well, thank you so much, Braden, for your update on the weather. And then when we come back from the break, we're going to go ahead and discuss a third suspect's name that is sent to be released on Friday in the 1983 Kentucky Fried Chicken murder that happened over in East Texas almost, I would say, 40 years ago. And then we get to hear from a about the genealogical technology that was able to help find a possible murder suspect from back in 1987. Stay with me on East Texas Today to learn more. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to East Texas Today on KETK Plus. I'm your host, Tristan Van Beem, and for those of you who are just now joining me, just recently had a weather update with Braden Seo. If you did miss that weather update, feel free to check out our shows on KTK and Fox 51 if you want to be updated on the weather going into today and also later in the week and next week as well. It is time to move into the one of the other stories that I talked to you all about before the break, and that is Rusk County officials are preparing to name a third suspect in the 1983 KFC murder case that claimed the lives of 5 people. The killings occurred on September 23, 1983, when Mary Tyler, Opie Hughes, Joey Johnson, David Maxwell, and Monty Landers were abducted from a Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant in Kilgore. They were driven to a remote oil field in Rusk County and fatally shot. Authorities identified 2 suspects within a week, Romeo Pinkerton and Darnell Hartsfield. However, indictments were not returned until 2005 after advances in DNA technology linked both men to blood evidence from the scene. Pinkerton is serving a life sentence and Hartsfield died in prison in 2023. KTK's Rachel Davis has more on the story about the releasing of the name of the third suspect.
42 years ago, in 1983, 5 people were abducted from a Kilgore, Kentucky fried chicken, taken to a remote oil-filled road where they were fatally shot.
It's just a slaughter. We got the call about a few minutes after 10 a.m. that the body's been recovered. They were taken 14.2 miles south of Kilgore.
It wasn't until 2005 the 2 suspects were convicted after advancements in forensic technology, Darnell Hartsfield and Romeo Pinkerton. In 2019, Lisa Tanner, the Texas Assistant Attorney General, sat down with KETK reviewing the massacre.
The most clear-cut, obvious smoking gun was the DNA of Romeo Pinkerton on a napkin that was inside the KFC, the DNA of Darnell Hartsfield on a box that was under the register in the KFC.
However, a third suspect remained at large after investigators found unidentified DNA on one of the victims' pants.
There's a dark hole there of, well, where is the third person?
Leaving investigators stumped for decades, waiting for forensic science to catch up to the evidence saved.
Whether or not that person's still alive is anybody's guess. But we go by the theory that they're still alive and eventually will be brought to justice.
But 4 decades since the murders, the Rusk County District Attorney says investigators have finally found a positive match to the unknown profile, leading to a specific individual, putting a close on a decades-long murder mystery.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for your coverage of that story. As mentioned, the name is set to be released on Friday, so be on the lookout for that. There will not be a morning show on Friday, but I'm sure that you can find that name in our newscast as well as on KTK.com. And for the next story that I want to show y'all, this is going to be the final one of our show as it's kind of wrapping up here. After nearly 4 decades of questions and heartbreak, authorities have announced a breakthrough in the 1987 murder of 29-year-old Ricky Heriage, bringing long-awaited closure to a cold case that haunted East Texas for years. On Tuesday, I sat down with a project manager from the Seasons of Justice organization to learn more about the technology that helped in finding a suspect. Here is the full interview. Hello everyone, thank you for watching KTK Plus. I'm your host Tristan Van Beem, and today we are reviewing a breakthrough in a nearly 40-year-old cold case murder in East Texas thanks to DNA technology. On March 8, 1987, the body of Ricky Heriage was discovered under a bridge on County Road 1500 Walnut Creek in Henderson County. Decades of dead-end leads and unprovable theories finally fruitioned into the ID of a suspect in the murder. A grant from the nonprofit organization known as Season of Justice helped the Henderson County Sheriff's Office develop a genetic profile, and joined with me today is Program Manager Kendall Mills, who is here to discuss the Season of Justice and how their work played such a crucial role in this case. Kendall, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Tristan. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for asking. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And just to start things off, could you explain what the Season of Justice organization is and what it does for people in need of answers?
Sure. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We were founded in 2020 with the explicit purpose to provide funding for advanced DNA testing in cold cases conducted by private labs that wouldn't otherwise be available through your government lab, your publicly funded crime lab, and also to support families of, whether it's long-term suspicious missing person cases or unsolved homicides or violent crime where there is no evidence. To support families in getting awareness on their case and hopefully bringing in new information that way. But ultimately, our bottom line is to push or to help push cases to prosecution by providing the necessary funding for access to that technology or that new lead, whatever it may be.
All right, well, thank you for explaining that. I really appreciate it. And I was also looking at the Season of Justice website, and I saw that the organization will put up billboards for those who are still missing. Does the organization pay for those, or how does that process work?
Yeah, so we have two programs. So we are a grant program. We fund these cases. We provide, we provide that necessary funding that wouldn't otherwise be available through generous donations from private citizens like you and like me who want to make a difference in these cold cases in an actual tangible way. And so a lot of times, our primary program is our DNA testing program, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But we also have families where they have cases with long-term missing persons. There's no evidence. There's no DNA to test. They're still looking for their loved one, or unsolved violent crime where they have exhausted all leads, all available evidence has been tested, et cetera. And the only thing left to do is try to get some human intelligence, try to raise community awareness, just to remind the community that families are still here, they're still looking for answers, and hopefully jog the memory of somebody who maybe has information that they didn't think was important at the time. But yeah, so that is our family grant program, also called our public awareness campaign program.
Now, I know we're talking about a case that happened over here in East Texas today, but does Season of Justice help solve these cases all over the United States? And if so, as a program manager, how do you guys handle all of those cold cases and try to help provide resources to those who need it?
That's a great question. Yes, we are nationwide. So far in 5 years, we have funded or supported over 240 individual cold cases through billboards and through DNA testing. And honestly, while I would love to say that I have a direct hand in solving these cases, I get to live vicariously through the forensic scientists and the detectives working these cases. You can think of us as a third-party finance department. The bills go to us for the work being conducted instead of going to the agency that does not have the funding, or instead of going to the family that does not have that money. The bills come to us, and we pay those bills, and detectives hopefully get the results that they need, and then families get the awareness that they need. We do a lot more hands-on work with the family cases. Like we will support the billboard creation. We will find the billboard location. We will hold the hand of the family from start to finish when it comes to purchasing a billboard and determining what's a good strategic media plan to accomplish the goals for that particular case. But when it comes to law enforcement, that's all the forensic scientists and all the detectives that do the work. I just get to pay their bills and say thank you for their dedication. So,
Well, I like how you mentioned that you live vicariously through them. Have you ever witnessed the genetic testing in the lab, like firsthand? Have you gone in and see what they do, or do you kind of just, like you said, write the checks?
I've been very lucky that our vendor partners. So we work with any private lab in the country that is accredited to handle forensic evidence, and there are some really wonderful labs out there that we've had the pleasure of being able to tour. There's one here in Texas. I'm actually in San Antonio, but there's one here in Houston that we have had the pleasure of touring, as well as a lab in Florida that we have had the pleasure of touring. So yeah, I've been able to see the work that they are doing. It's phenomenal. And then also, just the genetic research for genealogy that is coming through. That's also really cool to watch. That just looks like a whole other detective. You think like from It's Always Sunny with Charlie and all the different pins and everything.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
So was that the lab in Houston that helped solve this Ricky Heritage case, or is there another one that's closer to our area?
Um, so yes, it was.
It was?
We
Okay.
supported that. We supported the work that Othram did. That was the lab in Houston. And they do a very specific kind
Mm.
of DNA testing for genetic genealogy. We think of CODIS a lot of times. We think DNA profile, it goes into CODIS. And it does, but there are two different profiles or two different types of DNA profiles one for genealogy, one for CODIS, and they are not one and the same, and they do not, work together. And so we funded the work that Othram did to generate a second profile for genealogy. And then the FBI, I believe, did the genealogy.
Okay, well, that's great to hear that you all are working together. And now that I have some more background on Season of Justice and those watching have more background on it, can we kind of go over some background on what happened to Ricky Heritage? How was he murdered, and what happened back on that night in 1987?
So from what we know, Ricky was shot multiple times and he was thrown off a bridge. He was discovered by law enforcement, deceased later. I believe that there was evidence previously tested, not back in '87. DNA was just becoming a thing in the early '90s. And STR profiles weren't even, court standard till like 1991, I believe.
Hmm.
But detectives collected evidence, they preserved it, and then when Henderson County reopened that investigation a couple years ago, they were able to successfully get an STR profile of an unknown suspect from, I believe it was an article of victim's clothing. And that was uploaded to CODIS. And much like many cases, that did not lead to any kind of match in CODIS. And so there was an unknown profile of the suspect sitting in the database, just waiting to be matched to something. Um, and that's where genetic genealogy comes in.
Wow, and I love how you talked about genetic. What is it called? Genealogy? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, genealogy.
Genealogy. Okay, I want to make sure I get that straight because for about 38 years, Ricky's case was unsolved. But in 2019, a sheriff named Bodie Hillhouse gave the case another chance by sending clothing evidence from the crime scene to a forensic center in California, and the lab was able to obtain a DNA profile, but they couldn't really find a match for the DNA. And in 2022, the sheriff reached out to Seasons of Justice to conduct further analysis where this like cutting edge genealogical techniques were used. Can you explain to me what those cutting edge technology, what that edge technology is and how it helped this case?
Yeah, so Sheriff Hillhouse actually reached out to Othram, the lab in Houston, that conducts that DNA sequencing. And so what it is, it's called SNP profile. It's a specific type of profiler. They're looking for specific types of DNA markers that um, can be compared genetically. And this is a much larger um, set of markers to look at for analysts to look at than an STR profile is. Where an STR profile is looking at 24 specific markers for CODIS, this is looking at hundreds of thousands or 10,000 plus markers, and a lot of that is specific to genetics, and that allows detectives a different way of finding and narrowing down that suspect pool, especially because at-home DNA tests have become more prevalent, and we have databases, two public databases where people like myself who have taken an at-home DNA test and want to contribute can opt in for their DNA to be searched, or their data. It's not specific to them, it's all anonymous, but for their data to be searched by law enforcement in criminal investigations. And that's what leads to these breakthroughs in these cases. Genetic genealogists are detectives in their own right, and they are phenomenal at building family trees backwards from that unknown profile, and then from hopefully maybe a distant cousin that has decided to upload her DNA, and then they work backwards, and that's what happened in this case. So yeah, it's a lot, but it's really exciting. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I
Get
know.
into it.
I've watched some documentaries on how this genealogy stuff works, and it's actually very cool. I mean, like you said, they work backwards, so they just try to kind of start at this broad spectrum, and then they just kind of reverse. They kind of just take out everything until they finally get to this little peak at the bottom. So that's always been very fascinating to me. And I just want to ask another question of the technology that helped match the DNA on Ricky's clothes to a man named Dallas Reynolds Casanova. He died back in 2008, by the way. This DNA was able to link Casanova to the crime scene, but does this DNA confirm that Casanova was the one who committed the murder, or is it just confirming that he's a possible suspect?
That's a really good question. I would say that that's probably a question for either the DA or Sheriff Hillhouse in their
Hmm.
investigation. I will say that standard practice, and what is acceptable in court. So FGG, or forensic genetic genealogy, is what we call a leads generator. It's a
Mm.
tool, an investigative tool, but it is currently not something that is admissible in court. So that DNA profile um, cannot be used directly in court. What will happen is investigators, once they have that identified suspect, they will then take a buccal swab and get that traditional STR profile and compare it to the unknown STR profile that exists in CODIS to just have that confirmatory match. Now, whether or not this directly, implicates that's where it gets really difficult. We know that DNA is there, but exactly how it got there is where the courts come in, where that that process plays out so that that can be determined to the best of our abilities. Unfortunately, we do see a lot of our suspects in these cold cases deceased, and so at best, what we can at least do, or what sheriffs and like Sheriff Hillhouse can do, is provide information that this is most likely the person responsible. But yeah, that it does, it is disappointing when the person is already deceased and they don't get to see their day in court.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. And yeah, honestly, that probably is more the law enforcement side. I just wanted to see if you from Season of Justice had anything to comment on that. But I also just want to ask, is there anything else that sorry to cut the interview a little bit short, everyone. It is time to end the show, and I got to give a little outro here. Also, if you wanted to watch the rest of that interview, it is available on our YouTube page. Just look up KTK, go to the playlist, and look at KTK Plus Originals, and it'll be the newest one as of right there. Thank you all so much for watching East Texas today on KTK Plus. My name is Tristan Van Beem, and thank you all so much for joining me on another edition this morning. And I hope that y'all will come back and visit me tomorrow morning. See you then.